SoapBox News is brought to you by the Small Business Surgeon podcast and by Texas Media Foundry. Engineer your reality. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to tonight's episode of SoapBox News. I am your host, Samuel Smith, the Small Business Surgeon. It's Tuesday, November 15th today, and we are going to take a look around the news headlines from around the world and see what sense we can make of what everybody's talking about. My co-host, the lovely Nina Kaczorowski, is missing today. She's down in Houston working a job down there. So we are still auditioning for 2 or 3 co-hosts, if that's your jam. I'm also looking for experts. And as we go through the show today, I'll mention some topics. And for example, I have a crypto expert joining me here in a little while. I'm looking for an expert on the Ukrainian situation. I'm looking for an expert on the domestic situation with politics and stuff. So if you're one of those experts that's interested in commenting on the show, please do reach out to us here on Facebook by DM or by YouTube or Rumble. I believe we're on there too. So yeah, we're just making a news show to discuss the news and to talk about stuff that really should get talked about but isn't. And the end goal of Soapbox is to build a completely censorship-free platform for journalists, for broadcasters, for podcasters, and for content creators to put out completely uncensored content for discussion. I'm in no way advocating an uncensored social media platform. That would be a disaster. However, there is a need for us to be able to broadcast and to be able to discuss and to be able to talk about these topics free from censorship, which has, let's say, it's been pretty bad. If you haven't been cancelled from social media yet, maybe you're just not talking loud enough. So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're building. Anyway, without further ado, we are going to roll into today's headlines. Now, I post the headlines every morning on Facebook, and we need to post them somewhere else, don't we? We should be putting them on Twitter. All right, let's write this down. Like we're creating this show from scratch. This is like episode 5. So the goal is to do, several months worth of this as we develop the app. And then eventually we'll have a flagship show with a nice LED wall behind us, maybe some green screens, maybe a view of New York to make us look like an official news company. But again, I'm not reading the news. I'm reading what other journalists are reporting, what other media outlets are reporting, and maybe we can have some discussion and some dialogue on those. So let me move to my screen, make sure my screen is recording here. Okay, the first article today we're going to look at is from the New York Post, and it ties into yesterday. The headline reads, "How World Economic Forum and others are hiding their past ties with FTX." Now, this is by 3 journalists at the New York Post, and they pick up on what we were talking about yesterday with the World Economic Forum linking to FTX, which is quite strange. The article says the shocking implosion of the FTX crypto exchange has become an embarrassment for a who's who among global elites, with some issuing mea culpas and others apparently scrambling to hide their ties to its disgraced 30-year-old founder, Sam Bankman-Fried. What's funny is nothing is showing up now. However, web archive sites show that the World Economic Forum, remember those guys from Davos, they have listed FTX as one of their partners, saying that the Bahamas-based firm is a cryptocurrency exchange built by traders for traders. Now, what's interesting about this article is how it picks up from the article yesterday that Hal Turner originally broke. This seems to be taken much more seriously now as it moves slightly more towards the mainstream. I would call the New York Post a much more mainstream media outlet than the Hal Turner radio show. And it's very interesting they picked this up because as we move down the article here, FTX was a World Economic Forum partner. In light of last week's events, their partnership was suspended and they have been removed from the partners section of our website, a spokesman for the Geneva-based organization told the Post on Monday. According to one WEF insider, Bankman-Fried likely landed on the group's site because he donated cash to the group. Okay, so we can scroll down here, and this is from the World Economic Forum website. Now, we might add this has been removed now. So this was an old link here. And The WEF has not commented on why it deleted references to FTX. But what's more interesting is the fact that these guys are connected to the last group of politicians. We've got Tony Blair and Bill Clinton on the same stage as Sam Bankman-Fried. Excuse me. So it's just some interesting little things starting to kick off. And again, we will have another crypto expert come and talk to us about this. I'd like to get the two of them on together and see if we can figure this out. But this is like Bernie Madoff all over again. This appears to be a massive, massive Ponzi scheme. But it appears, notice I put a very strong inflection on it appears that there are some very, very high-level politicians, celebrities, and business owners caught up not only in the endorsement of this scheme, but in the benefits of the scheme. There are ties to politicians, there are ties to Ukraine. Everybody I know that owns crypto and that has traded in crypto, everybody I know is hurt because of this. Whether they owned anything to do with FTX directly or not, when we take a look at the crypto markets over the last week, there has been billions of dollars in wealth just wiped out, just gone. And I had some investments in crypto, and I dipped in and out of it, and I jumped in and out, and I made a little profit, and I lost a little money, and I made a little, and I lost a little, and to be honest, it's not that I got bored, I just didn't see that it was the best use of my time and my energy and my money trading in there, so I stopped, and I went into it with several thousand, and I came out of it with several thousand more, and that was that. But I know a lot of guys, my age and younger, that were holding crypto for the long run and have taken an absolute bath on this through no fault of their own. Let me just reiterate here the seriousness of this issue. This was not an investment that looked good that went bad. This was not a group of real estate developers investing in a set of condos and messing up. This was a strategic, just ripping off of every single investor they could possibly find. It was done on purpose. It was done criminally, okay? And you can trace the beneficiaries of this criminal action to the very people that are in charge of the fucking country. This does not seem like it should go away overnight. This should be investigated by people that are able to investigate. But the problem now is the people doing the investigating are also closely tied to the beneficiaries of the crime. And, well, we investigated ourselves and we found no evidence of wrongdoing. Later on in the show, we'll be hearing from Liam Chase, another crypto expert that I have got in my network, and we will be getting his take on this and getting a rundown of who all's affected, and then maybe what we can do about it. Because as you scroll through the New York Post article, you can see that Sam Bankman-Fried had some very, very, very powerful friends. And I think this was done deliberately. I think it was asset stripping of everybody dumb enough to believe this guy's Ponzi scheme. I mean, look at him. Just look, he looks like a fucking tool, doesn't he? Would you give him any money? I certainly wouldn't now. And yes, I'll stand by that. You can quote me on that. He just looks like a fucking tool. I would not give him any money. He looks like a raging fucking prick. And I'm sorry to everybody that trusted this guy. I'm sorry to everybody that was taken by this guy. And honestly, I hope you fucking grab him by the balls and nail him to a tree by his balls until we figure this out. Because this is pure theft. This was done deliberately. It was done on purpose. It was calculated. And look what it's done to every single fucking investor out there that has nothing to do with this. They're all paying the price for this greedy little prick's actions. So, yeah. And I'll stand by that. You can quote me on it, please. Samuel Smith, right? Put that down. All right, for this next bit, we're going to hop over to the Zoom screen where earlier today I got to talk to crypto expert Liam Chase and get his take on the whole situation. Let's check that out. All right, so guys, I actually have the pleasure now of being joined by Liam Chase from CryptoCashflowPro.com, and Liam's going to give us a little bit of his insight as to what's going on over at FTX. Liam, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me, and I'm super excited to talk about this fraud.
Dude, what the hell's going on, man? What is going on?
Oh, well, where do we start? I mean, I'll be blunt. I've never liked this guy. Just his whole demeanor. He did this video. They called him the most generous billionaire, and he just came across as this fake, altruistic, pardon my language, fuck, like he's just a little twat.
I mean, to be honest, he looks like his mother dresses him. I'm scrolling through this New York Post article, and I shouldn't judge people by their appearance. We should judge a man on the content of his character. However, if I were on stage with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton, I wouldn't be dressed like he's dressed. I think that's a huge red flag to me, that somebody in charge of tens of billions of dollars looks like he dressed himself. And I don't have a problem with wearing t-shirts and shorts in the appropriate settings, but he looks like he slept in his clothes. There's no easy way to say it. How did a guy like this walk me through how this Sam Bankman-Fried got so much power and so much responsibility when he's dressed like quite frankly, a 15-year-old high school kid? What's going on?
Well, it's still being discovered. That's a big question of the crypto industry that has a lot of people in the crypto industry, deep in the crypto industry, are questioning if he's actually a plant, because his parents do have connections to very high places. His father, I believe, was an MIT professor. His mother did some work with the Democratic Party. He's well connected with, the World Economic Forum. He's on stage with Bill Clinton. I mean, how is this guy that half of us have never heard of, how is he in such high places? And, and how did he raise how did his company become worth $30 billion? I mean, they were calling him the next Warren Buffett, and it comes to find out he was actually the next Bernie Madoff. So how it happened, that's still a mystery to the crypto community. Nobody really knows. I mean, obviously it's the connections of his parents, it's his relationship that he has at MIT, it's his relationship with the WEF, but how, I think it really goes back to the parents. And there's speculation that the Democratic Party was sending money to Ukraine. Ukraine was sending money to the FTX platform, and then FTX was sending money to the Democratic Party. So there's questions of laundering.
Is that speculation, or has it been proven? Because as I dug a little bit closer into this and went and pulled up the list of Democrat donors, I also noticed that along with almost $40 million to the Democratic Party, they had donated at least $20 million, if not $25 million or so, to the Republican Party.
Yes, I saw that.
Does this implicate everybody? Can we say at some point here that we may need to look at both sides of this fucking political coin and find out who's taking the money?
Yeah, but I would say it's more so an SBF. I think what was evil and what people really dislike about him, and like what the founder of Binance said, CZ, like this whole thing started because the founder of Binance, which is the largest crypto international exchange, he basically said, we're going to dump your token, and they owned about 500 million, I believe it was. And when that happened, and the reason he said he was going to dump it is because SBF, that's his nickname, he's literally lobbying against the entire crypto industry. And that's what CZ said, like, we don't appreciate you going behind our back and trying to impose regulations on this industry that we're trying to grow together, and you're going against everybody.
Because this guy was incredibly well trusted, he was well networked, he was well known. FTX sponsors some of the most, they sponsor Mercedes-Benz in Formula One,
F1, MLB, NBA.
So his statement was very much along the lines of, I'm sorry, I fucked up. That's literally what he said.
It's a joke.
But what, as an expert to you, is this a fuck up, Or, as it appears
No.
to me, is it a deliberate theft of resources using other places to launder money?
Well, I would say a couple of things. How red flags weren't flagged throughout all this is, and there was some I mean, there's BlackRock was invested into FTX.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of very reputable firms that obviously did due diligence and still went through with this. So, but I was always skeptical, and I always wonder how this made it through. In fact, I was reading through and I come to find out that they said in their terms of services that they would not be using any of their customers' assets to trade, to leverage, to do anything with. They said they would be held as is.
Ooh.
They wouldn't be touched. Yet they were offering anywhere from 5 to 8% on non-yield bearing assets. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to sit here and say in your terms of services that we're not going to do anything with your funds, but then pay 5 to 8% on things like Bitcoin that don't actually generate yield, where is
Right.
that coming from?
It seems to me like a very, very complicated Ponzi scheme with money laundering attached, and it looks as though the more news breaks about this, it looks as though that everybody involved at the top levels of this was complicit in this crime. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very frustrating because this puts it shines a
Mm-hmm.
terrible light on crypto as a whole. And what the mainstream investors don't realize is that this actually has nothing to do with crypto, right?
Right.
This is a centralized company, right? This is an LLC. This is an entity. This is not an actual blockchain. This is, nothing fundamentally went wrong
Mm-hmm.
with blockchain and crypto here. It's just that we had a large player who mishandled billions of dollars and is now putting an extremely terrible light on the entire space on top of everything that's already going on. I mean, I had my dad yesterday call me. He's like, "What do you know about this NFT thing?" I'm like, "You mean FTX?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, that's last week, dude. You're late." He's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, I'm seeing it all over the news this week. They must
Yeah.
be late." I'm like, "Yeah." And so, you got mainstream investors like my father who's starting to hear about this stuff, and it just puts a terrible light on on something that has nothing to do with the underlying and
Well,
fundamental technology. It's all has to do with bad actors, wearing a false. They're pretenders, right? They're just
right.
pretenders. This is not real technology. So it's very frustrating. It's obviously going to set back the industry a couple of years
That's
until
my next
people,
question.
yeah.
So like me, as I'm in my early 40s now, and I got a lot of friends my age and older that do invest in stuff.
Hmm.
I have zero confidence now in putting any resources into crypto for a minute. I'm a little bit. That's it's a little bit scary to see billions and billions of dollars just wiped out like that by actual criminals. So I have a couple of questions for you here, Liam. I don't want to put you on the spot, but these guys appear to be involved in a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a good statement?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. I agree.
so if there's a criminal conspiracy to commit fraud here, how as an industry do we hold these guys accountable and punish the people involved? And then secondly, what's next for the future of crypto? Because guys like me and guys with a lot more money than me are very, very, very cautious now about putting any more into what has turned out to be something fronted by a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. So, I mean, on one front, this is, first of all, FTX wasn't even an American entity,
Bahamas,
right?
right?
Yeah, they're an
Yeah.
international entity, but it's
hmm
absolutely a failure of the regulators. I mean, we've been waiting
Oh,
for regulation
definitely.
for almost 2 years. The reason they're in the Bahamas, the reason people are going overseas to these exchanges is because they won't provide regulation to give these
hmm
institutions the ability to come on shores. And if they were on shores, there would be a lot more transparency.
So we're buying. Let me get this right. We're investing in an unregulated company that
unregulated.
has its headquarters in a country that won't do regulations, so we can operate outside of the SEC. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So what has happened with this then is in a sense, it's the ultimate definition of fuck around and find out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, precisely.
We're deliberately doing business with a country, sorry, with a company
Yeah.
that's based in a country that cannot be regulated. So what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, precisely. They have no transparency. They're not public. They're not regulated by any American institution. And even their American branch went into the bankruptcy, right? The one that they tried to clean up. That I mean, the guy claimed that FTX US was completely separate and unaltered by the primary business. And we found out that was also a lie, because that went into bankruptcy along with everything else. So yeah, I mean, for Americans, it didn't really, like, you couldn't access that platform as an American unless you really, really tried, like through a VPN, and you had to get a international ID card and things like that. So I don't think a lot of Americans were affected personally, but obviously, like I said, it shines a terrible light on the entire space, and it calls into question, like, I absolutely do think we do need some regulation. I think regulation will be good. It will give us the guidelines and Native American companies, the guidelines to actually start building and growing, because everybody's walking on eggshells right now. SEC is going after this project. They went after some project that was trying to basically be like a YouTube. Meanwhile, this guy, SBF, was having meetings with, Chair Gensler in his office. It's like they're turning a blind eye, and it was all happening right in front of them. And so, yeah, we need regulation so that people can stop walking on eggshells. We can have some clarity, and true real capital and real innovation can start being done, and capital can start really pouring in.
Man, it's such a mess, and I'm terribly sorry for all the investors that got taken for a ride. I mean, there was a lot of endorsements behind this, a lot of celebrities behind this, a lot of people lost a lot of money. I can't get over the way that this guy carries himself, the way this guy dresses himself, and the fact that somebody who carries himself a certain way has the ability to control billions and billions and billions of dollars. I've come from the bottom up, and I know how hard it is to get into that 7 and 8 figure space. And now we've got a guy that's come from nothing and wears pajamas and is bouncing around the 10 and 11 figure space. I think there's some smoke there that's generating some fire that needs to be investigated. And just like to go out on a limb and say Sam Bankman-Fried did not kill himself. Maybe we're a little too early with that one, huh?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was that. I didn't expect that. But yeah, I mean, look, this is the reason.
Journalists are making all kinds of connections with crypto and with suicides. There's a lot to dig into, and unfortunately, I don't know enough about it, Liam. So, man.
Yes.
Before we go, do you have anything else to add for the viewers here that may instill a little bit of confidence in crypto investing moving forward?
Well, that's what I wanted to say is, look, I never used FTX. The only platform and exchange that I use is Coinbase. And the reason is because they are publicly traded. So their books are a little more transparent. They're not as transparent as the blockchain, but they are a little more transparent. And by me saying I only use Coinbase, that's not saying that nothing could ever happen to them. Absolutely. But I only use Coinbase to buy my crypto, and then I put it onto my hard wallet where I have complete and full ownership of it, rather than leaving it in the hands of somebody like Sam Bankman-Fried.
Absolutely.
So use Coinbase to buy it, and as soon as you buy it, get it onto your hard wallet where only you have access and control to it. And that's what I would say.
That's outstanding recommendation. Yes, it's vital that you pull your money off these exchanges and put it somewhere safe that only you can get access to it. Liam, we are out of time on the segment. Guys, thank Liam so much for coming on. Liam, it's been a pleasure to get to interview you.
Has.
Guys, if you have liked what Liam does, you can follow him at cryptocashflowpro.com. Liam, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today on SoapBox, and hope to get to talk to you in the future. Thanks a lot, sir. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Bye.
All right, take care. All right, moving on. Before I get in trouble from the production team, because they're all glaring at me now. Moving on. Again, I'm trying to use verified news sources that have some credibility within the mainstream. So the next article is from Twitter via Fox News via Twitter. It's a tweet from Dr. Eli David of last night's Tucker Carlson program. And the reason I want to play this now is because we don't talk about the vaccine. We are not allowed to talk about the vaccine. We don't mention the vaccine because anybody that talks about the vaccine is brainwashed. So now we're going to go to the very, very brainwashed Tucker Carlson and listen for just a minute about what he has to say about the new news coming out about the consequences and the adverse reactions from this mandated shot.
Link to neurodegenerative disease, myocarditis, Bell's palsy, liver disease, impaired adaptive immunity, impaired DNA damage response, etc.
What? Let me play that one more time. That sounds like a lot. That sounds like a lot, because if I didn't have any of those symptoms before, let's just play back again from Tucker Carlson some of the now known reactions to the mandated vaccine.
Link to neurodegenerative disease, myocarditis.
I don't know what myocarditis is.
Bell's palsy.
Bell's palsy. All right, so myocarditis is scar tissue surrounding the heart. It's something to do with that. Again, not an expert. Bell's palsy is where one side of your face becomes paralyzed. I know a little bit about that because it actually happened to my dad, and it can happen from excess stress and pressure, but it can also happen, apparently, as an adverse consequence of a vaccine. But let's carry on and listen to more of Fox News.
Liver disease, impaired.
I'm glad I don't have liver disease.
Adaptive immunity.
Impaired adaptive immunity. I don't even know what the fuck that is. Impaired adaptive immunity. It's like they just took 3 words and pushed them together to make a talking point.
Impaired DNA damage response.
Impaired DNA damage response. Imagine that.
Etc.
Etc. The word you were looking for, by the way, for etc., Tucker, was tumorigenesis.
Tumorigenesis.
Right there. You got that?
Tumorigenesis.
Now, I don't blame you, because sometimes they put complicated shit on my teleprompter and I can't read it either, so really good save. But I had to go look that up because it means that the adverse side effects of this vaccine not only include, let's rewind it here and grab it one more time. They only include the disturbances potentially of a causal link to neurodegenerative disease. Now, I'm going to try that word again. Neurodegenerative disease is the disease of the brain. It's the disease that breaks down the neural pathways in the brain. That's a really, really bad disease to have. Myocarditis, the next up, that is the scar tissue surrounding the heart. Again, I'd have to read more about that. I'm not a doctor, but I do know that most conspiracy theorists do not suffer from myocarditis. Is there a link? I don't know.
Link to neurodegenerative disease, myocarditis, Bell's palsy, liver disease, impaired adaptive immunity, impaired DNA damage response,
etc. That's a lot of shit that I didn't have any of that wrong with me before 2020. It sure would suck going into 2023 and having any of that stuff wrong with me because of something that was mandated. Let's go back to Tucker and see what he says next.
etc. So it's possible, in fact, it's looking likely that the vaccine might suppress the immune system.
It's looking likely that the vaccine might suppress the immune system. Oh, fuck.
This fact, the authors concluded, will, quote, have a wide range of consequences, not the least of which include the reactivation of latent viral infections and the reduced ability to effectively combat future infections.
So when can we start talking about this? When is it okay to say, you know what, this might be an actual problem? I would like to find we muted this, didn't we? So the unmutable laptop is unmutable, but I would like to find an expert on this. I don't know that we could get Dr. Robert Malone on the show, but if he's around, if he's listening, I'd love to interview him. But I would like to find an expert on this because now this is breaking into the mainstream. When we look at data from the British government, from the Australian government, man, there was a terrifying statistic from the Australian government showing a 70% decline in birth rates in Australia from December 2020 to December 2021. And if you remember, these vaccines started getting rolled out in early 2021. So the first evidence we would see of drastically lowered birth rates, drastically increased miscarriages, and all that other side effects to do with newborns would start coming out right around November, December of 2021, and that would be the earliest data available. It would be very, very interesting to see how this pans out as the months go on and as more data becomes available. Right now, it does appear as though these vaccines may be doing more damage than they actually were able to prevent. So let's carry on. Let's listen a little bit more to the monologue here.
End quote. Now, again, we sincerely hope that's not true.
We all hope it's not true, Tucker. Unfortunately, even though it's very easy to manipulate statistics and manipulate data, this data is just going to be very, very hard to cover up.
But it's not just the conclusion of one scientific journal. The Lancet, maybe the most famous scientific journal in the world, released similar findings in February. The Lancet's piece was entitled, quote, "Risk of Infection, Hospitalization, and Death Up to 9 Months After a Second Dose of COVID-19 Vaccine." A physician called Kenji Yamamoto made this observation about the data from the Lancet. He wrote this in a letter to the Journal of Virology, and we're quoting, "The study showed that immune function among vaccinated individuals 8 months after the administration of 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine was lower than that among the unvaccinated individuals."
Well, that's a problem, isn't it? So we've got immune function amongst vaccinated individuals 8 months after the vaccine being lower than somebody that's not vaccinated at all and never was. You know, I've got my own personal feelings about vaccines. I'm very, very, very pro-vaccine. I think they've been a just incredible tool in the modernization of mankind. I mean, the fact that kids don't die from cholera or polio or typhoid or TB or any of that shit is amazing. I'm a full believer in medical science. I'm very pro-vaccine, but I'm more pro-choice. And I looked at this vaccine and I thought, well, you know, I'm not particularly at risk and I don't particularly care to have injections, and I'll keep working out and I'll keep eating vegetables and I'll keep taking my vitamins and everything will be okay. And then I caught COVID and well, fuck, I took ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and it went away in like a day and a half. You know, like, this is bad. There's a whole lot of people that would not have taken this were it not mandated. There's a whole lot of people that would have said, you know what, I'm okay. Look at the flu vaccine. If you're at risk, you get the vaccine. If you're a bit old, you get the vaccine. If you're young, you get the vaccine. But most of us in the middle, we catch the flu, we beat the flu, we get better, we go back to work, right? We develop immunity. We develop that immunity through contracting the virus and through developing our own antibodies to it, right? That's how it works. That's how it's worked historically. That's what herd immunity is. And I am not a doctor, I am not a vaccine expert, but I would certainly, after today's news coming out, I would certainly love to interview one. And I think it's time that some of the new politicians that got voted into office over the course of the midterms last week, I think some of them should be looking very, very closely at what appears to be a huge crime against humanity with these vaccines being rolled out and mandated worldwide. And now we're looking at a very, very serious set of medical consequences for us to navigate through over the next couple of years. Yeah, so don't talk about the vaccine, but maybe it's time we started hearing from some experts, hearing from them publicly, and started putting the dots together so we can make a plan to move forward, right? Like, it's done now. Already let the horse out of the stable. He's bolted. We have to figure out, not only as a country, but as an entire planet, like, what the best way for us to move forward is. And I don't think that depopulation by forced vaccine by a bunch of billionaires is the right way to go. But shh, don't say that out loud. So before we move on, just a quick reminder, my name is Samuel Smith. This is SoapBox News, and we are sponsored by the Small Business Surgeon and the Texas Media Foundry. So before we go to our next segment, I want to show you a really quick clip from the archives. This is a commercial we made for our friends over at yourtaxcoach.biz. Got to fly out to Arizona and shoot out there with them. They were great sports, and this is the kind of content that the Texas Media Foundry can create. And remember, this is how we pay for the show. So please go check it out. And if you know anybody looking to get some commercials made, this high quality content that Tex and the guys are able to put together, just give us a shout and we'll get you taken care of. We'll be right back.
You're a typical accountant, aren't you, Steve? I bet you can't even spell IRS.
You're a fucking bean counter. You still haven't called Andrew about issuing his 1099. You didn't even deduct their home office or their trip to Cabo. Why didn't you take the employee tax credits for your clients? You're not one of us, Steve.
Crazy! Stop! Stop! My suit! My suit! Is that my suit? Oh, my suit! Oh!
Ditch your old accountant and see how much money you could save at yourtaxcoach.biz.
I hope you stuck around and enjoyed that commercial. Again, that's what we do for a living around here. That's how we make our money. So if there's any of you guys out there looking to add a little bit of sizzle to your company, give us a shout. All right, moving on. The next headline, Walmart offers to pay $3.1 billion to settle opioid lawsuits. Well, this sounds complicated. Why in the world is Walmart paying to settle an opioid lawsuit? Now, I don't know how many of you spend time in rural America. In a prior career, I was an oil and gas landman. And what I did was I went around from courthouse to courthouse researching mineral ownership records, and I spent a lot, and I do mean a lot of time in rural Texas. And what I saw there over the course of the 11 years that I had that career was a slow and steady degradation of the small towns that were out there. A lot of the industry had started to dry up, and as Walmart's, now this was in the early 2000s, as Walmart's started to come into communities and build stores, what it did was decimate local economies. For example, Ace Hardware, that went out. Like in all the little small rural towns used to have an Ace Hardware, didn't they? You know, they all used to have a feed supply. They all used to have a tractor supply. But all of that went the way of Walmart's. And what it did was just completely decimate local economies, local jobs, local manufacturing, and outsource this stuff all over the rest of the world, because Walmart, with its buying power and global resources, can ship goods and materials often cheaper, often lower quality, but they can get it there cheaper. And Walmart was a race to the bottom. And what they didn't take into account was the amount of socioeconomic damage it was doing to these small communities, which then led to this opioid epidemic. Now, I don't blame Walmart entirely, because if you leave a redneck alone for long enough, he's going to figure out two things. One, he's going to figure out how to make a guitar from whatever bits and pieces he's got laying around. And two, he's going to figure out how to get high, or drunk. So if you leave him alone for long enough, the rural Texan will definitely figure out ways to entertain himself. So I can't blame Walmart completely, but they have to have some accountability for handing out extremely powerful prescription drugs like candies with very little oversight. And as we dig into this a little bit more, so this is an article from Jeff. Man, why do they put complicated names on this stuff? Jeff Mulvihill. I don't know. You'll have to we'll zoom in on his name, give him some credit for the AP, and please apologize to Jeff if you see him for me butchering his name. So we're taking into account his article. It says Walmart proposed a $3.1 billion legal settlement over the toll of powerful prescription opioids sold at its pharmacies, becoming the latest major drug industry player to promise to support state, local, and tribal governments still grappling with a crisis in overdose deaths. Well, if you have a lot of overdose deaths, eventually there won't be a crisis anymore, will there? Didn't think about that. So, not only is Walmart involved in this, but as we dig a little deeper, CVS and Walgreens are both involved too, and they've said, we'll pay a $5 billion settlement. Now, why is that? How much money is at stake here? The article goes on to say, with the crisis still raging, the focus is now on how the settlement dollars, now totaling more than $50 billion, will be used and whether they will help curtail record numbers of overdose deaths, even as prescription drugs have become a relatively small portion of the epidemic. Again, they probably figured out how to make it quicker in a bathtub. So what we have to look at here is the connection between pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical distributors, i.e. the pharmacists, i.e. the Wal-Marts and the Walgreens and all those guys, and say how much profit is involved in keeping people medicated and high and consuming. How much profit is involved where you can pay a $5 billion fucking fine and just walk away like it's nothing? Because if you gave me the opportunity to make $100 billion doing something illegal and saying, hey, Sam, we're going to fine you $5 billion for doing it, but we'll look the other way and you can keep the other $95 billion. I would not do that because I have to sleep at night, but there are a lot of people that would certainly take you up on that offer. Commit a $100 billion crime and pay a $5 billion penalty and keep the rest. That's fairly enticing. And when the guys committing the crimes are so high up with so much money that no one will dare prosecute them, this is what you end up with. You end up with a little show trial, you end up with a little settlement, you end up with, oh, a couple of $1 billion, no worries, off you go, mate, look the other way. And that's what's happening here. How do you fix it? I don't know. I have no idea. But like, I don't know, what if a small town kicked out of Walmart? What would happen then? What if a small town had to cut its own lumber and make its own construction materials and harvest its own food and make its own electricity? And I don't know. Maybe this whole globalist outsourcing, transporting everything everywhere on a fucking truck, maybe that's like come to its close. Maybe that's why we've got rampant hyperinflation. Maybe that's why the cost of goods is just soaring astronomically, is the fact that everything we consume is outsourced, and everything that you touch arrives to you by a fucking logistics chain that involves diesel, 18-wheelers, drivers, forklifts. You cannot have anything in this country except for the stuff produced at a micro local level. There's nothing that comes to you that hasn't been created, shipped, and moved from somewhere else. And maybe that's what's causing a lot of the economic hardships in the small rural communities that are driving people to use these drugs. I'm not suggesting how to fix it. I'm just suggesting maybe if you connected the dots and pulled these big companies out and started investing back into small business, investing back into mom and pops, and investing back into communities. Because really, what's going on in Syria doesn't affect me. What's going on in Europe doesn't affect me. What's going on in America doesn't affect me. But what's going on in my community affects me. It affects me directly. It affects my employees. It affects my customers, my clients. It affects everybody. And so if we started out looking out for our communities and building right from the bottom, I think things might go a hell of a lot better, because everybody's so concerned about what they can do for themselves. They haven't stopped for a minute and said, how can I make the world around me a little bit better place? And I think as a human being, that should be a fundamental directive for everybody's core human operating system. How can I make the world around me a better place? All right, so keep that in the top of your head. Okay, Walmart, shit, I don't know. I hate it. I don't like it at all. Maybe I'm just nostalgic for going in the village shop and going in the village butchers, and I don't know, but I don't like it. And I certainly don't like what it's done to small town rural America. So anyway, all right, next article. Let's close that down. Now, this one is a touchy one. This one is one that I don't really want to do. I feel compelled to do it. I feel compelled to bring it to you. This is an article from CNN.com. and we are looking at Uvalde and the school shooting that happened in Uvalde earlier this year. Tragic. I think 19 children there were killed, as well as 2 teachers. But CNN now is saying exclusive new audio of phone calls shows for the first time that a senior Uvalde officer was told children needed to be rescued from inside a classroom. As a father, there are many things that I could comment about on Uvalde, and I just don't really want to. It is quite devastating that this fella could have been intercepted in the street before he went into the school. He could have been stopped in the school. There was police in the school. It's just, the whole thing doesn't add up. And if there is an expert in domestic terrorism, if there's an expert in law enforcement, if there's somebody like that out there that I can interview to provide and to shed some light on this, I would love it. Because when we look a little closer, we can see patterns in mass shootings that are incredibly disturbing. We can see patterns of coercion, patterns of mental instability. We can see patterns of circumventing of gun laws, all this stuff, to where more gun laws won't help, and more police officers in schools won't help, because there were police officers there with guns. And this just seems to be a incredibly tragic situation that doesn't add up. And I don't think that we're being told anywhere near the truth about what happened in Uvalde at this school and about this shooting. And so CNN goes on to say, I don't really want to read it. It's very, it's heart-wrenching. They received a call from a 10-year-old that was in the classroom at the time, and they still didn't fucking go in and break the door. I just don't know. I can't even fathom how you can get a phone call from a 10-year-old girl in a classroom and be a man in body armor and be a man with a machine gun and just not go into that classroom. And at the time of the call, there were 8 or 9 children in there that were still alive. There's no excuse as to why it took so long for those police to engage this guy. There's no excuse whatsoever. It wouldn't surprise me if that guy was standing there and didn't know what to do and just froze, just as much as it wouldn't surprise me as if that guy had instructions to stand down and wait. Nothing here adds up. Nothing here makes sense. And I hate it. I'm a dad. Let's go look at the next article. Judge seals autopsy reports of Uvalde mass shooting victims. Now, this was done a couple of weeks ago, November 7th, and this is being reported on the MSN. Texas District Court judge in Uvalde has sealed autopsy reports of those killed during the Robb Elementary School mass shooting in May. Judge Camille DuBose of the 38th District Court on Friday ordered the records be sealed and provided to the local district attorney. In a motion to seal the records, prosecutors had argued the autopsies could reveal information that the authorities needed to preserve until the investigation into the shooting is completed. Again, it's another example of we're investigating ourselves and we find no wrongdoing. At some point, if I was a fucking parent of a kid at Uvalde that had got killed, if one of my kids got killed like that, I couldn't even imagine the repercussions. You've got 20 sets of parents, you've got 40 people, 19 sets of parents, 21 if you count the teachers' parents, that have kids that aren't coming back. And the fact that we have public servants on video laughing and joking about this, and there's so much apparent corruption coming from the Uvalde police chief, the Uvalde mayor, and the Uvalde city council. Where do we go as a society to say, hey guys, investigate this group of people? because the group of people involved are the ones that are in charge of the entire community there. So there can be no repercussions against them because they have every chance of hiding every last piece of evidence. I don't know, but when you add up Uvalde and you add up what happened in Las Vegas and you add up all these other school shootings, something isn't right. And there are commonalities that run between every single one of these shootings that need to be investigated. I'm not the guy to do it. I'm just the guy to maybe spark a little spark and light a little fire and say, hey, maybe we should be taking a closer look at this. Okay, so moving into the last segment of today's show, a little bit of light relief, especially after those heavy topics. Let's take a look over here at the BBC, and they are reporting today that ancient fish teeth reveal the earliest signs of cooking. Now, I love history. I really do. I've been a historical researcher here in Texas. I grew up in a town that was, founded by the Romans. I grew up around a 11th century monastery. So much history. I love it. And the fact now that we're seeing human history get discovered in real time, it's like everything's getting older. The better our techniques are, the better our research is, the better our dating is, the better our museums become. Everything's getting older. And this fish head is no exception. And I find this absolutely fascinating because now we know human beings used to fire cook food hundreds of thousands of years earlier than previously thought. They found evidence on 780,000-year-old remains of a huge carp-like fish discovered in northern Israel. Scientists noted the transition from eating raw food to eating cooked food had dramatic implications for human development and behavior. Now, this is such a bombshell because the previous earliest evidence of cooking dated from around 170,000 BC. So these guys have literally just added like an instant 600,000 years of proven evidence to human history, which I think is just absolutely amazing. The amount of changes and the amount of transition that the Earth has gone through in the last 1,000 years. Could you imagine, walking down the street and finding stuff from 1,000 years ago? You can in very, very, very rare cases. But finding something from 780,000 years ago, that's unheard of. The remains of the 2-meter fish were found at the Geisha Beno Yaakov archaeological site, which spans the River Jordan. So you know how old this is. River Jordan, Sea of Galilee, Jesus, that's just 2,000 years. 170,000 years is what we had, and now we've got 780,000 years. And I've still got friends, bless them, that think the Earth is 6,000 years old. I love it. It's great, but everybody's allowed to believe what they like. I'm going with the research, with the sciencey guy. Researchers studied crystals from the enamel of the fish's teeth, which were found in large quantities on the site. The way the crystals had expanded was a sign they had not been exposed to direct fire, but cooked at a lower temperature. Gaining the skill required to cook food marks a significant evolutionary advance. Dude, I love this stuff, and I highly, highly, highly encourage you to go and check out as much as you can about human history, because when I was in school, I'm going to show my age now, but when I was in school, 30 fucking years ago, wow, that hurt. That hurt to say. When I was in school 30 years ago, what we were taught then was the cutting edge stuff from 50 years ago. By the time it had gone through the scientific community and been put into textbooks and been approved by the school boards, by the time we learned, we were about 20 years behind. So we were learning facts about humanity in the 1990s that were discovered in the 1960s and 1970s. Well, now, obviously, we've got much, much faster propagation of information. But you have to be able to update your position based on the introduction of new evidence. And now we're getting all this new evidence that's showing humanity is going back much, much, much further than we'd ever anticipated. And a really great source for this, and I don't like plug-in shows, but you guys have to check this out. there is a brand new series on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock, who is one of the propagators of an alternative human history. But he's put together an 8-part series backed up with as much evidence as possible, showing a alternate human history involving apocalypses and comet strikes and floods and it's cataclysms. It's absolutely fantastic. It's very, very fascinating. So if you get a chance, run over to Netflix and check out Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock. He was actually on the Joe Rogan podcast just a few days ago. You can catch him on there. And Graham, if you would like to be interviewed on my show, I would love to talk to you about human history. I think the work you've done is absolutely fascinating. So that's going to do for today. We've had everything from ancient fish all the way to vaccines and financial conspiracies. I hope that you all got something out of this. Do remember, my name is Sam. I am the small business surgeon, and the Texas Media Foundry is sponsoring this show, so we really appreciate you guys checking those guys out. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for today's Soapbox News. The way you can help me is to like the show, leave us a comment, share the show, and if you know anybody that would be a good fit for an interview, have them reach out and we'll make it happen. All right, that's going to be it from me for tonight. You'll be good, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow morning with a roundup of the day's headlines. Good night.
This is Soapbox News, brought to you by the Small Business Surgeon Podcast. Check it out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcasts. And by Texas Media Foundry. Video production for transportation, industrial, small and large businesses all across the country. Check them out at txfoundry.com.